G'day guys, Daniel here from Caravan Industry Victoria, and I've got Linda Hitch here again. We talk some more important information, and Linda's from Hitch Engineering. So today's topic and what we're talking about now is going to be axles, tyres and rims that sort of go with the tyres and the ratings of those, Linda. And we're also going to cover off, as part of that, because it sort of groups in, is wheel guards as well. So the ratings of these are important and very a lot in it, but also extremely important.
There's a lot. With some caravan buyers, this is one of the big ticket items that they want to make sure that the caravan they get is essentially designed for the tours they want to take. So obviously we have different grades of road, gravel, and then you've got some of the heavy duty terrain. So each of the suspensions are designed for a particular terrain and the inputs that they have. So just so that people understand, if we touch on the axle first, which I consider to be part of the suspension, the whole point of that, the tyre and the suspension, is to essentially absorb the road input. So as the caravan, so the body is here, the suspension is here, and the road will provide an input through the tyres. And now the suspension will absorb and transfer that weight so that it doesn't directly go, only a small percentage will go through to the caravan. This will help protect your caravan, and you don't shake the life out of the caravan where you open up and you finish up somewhere in Perth and you go, why have all the fittings fallen, and the lights are no longer there, and the air conditioning doesn't work anymore, and why does the switch not operate? This is why, because you've been driving, you haven't really driven to the condition. You've gone beyond what that axle and suspension is capable of absorbing from a load, from an input. Yeah. So there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into axle and suspension design. And within the ADRs, there is a requirement that if your suspension is a load sharing or non-load sharing, you do need to meet a certain percentage requirement. And just to very briefly touch on that, load sharing is where you have the two axles and they essentially are linked together, so that if the first axle goes over a bump, the second axle will take some of that load, and it's just about distributing load. Whereas on the trailing arm designs, they're not linked. They're independent. So each of those have to be designed with this factor of 120%. It just means that instead of both wheels, so in an independent suspension, when the first axle gets an impact, none of it is actually going to the second axle. So this first axle needs to be over-designed, essentially. Yeah, correct. That's what that's about there. So obviously, yeah, sorry.
One of the things that I sort of, how I describe it, and typically in industry we know them as independent and, you know, well, leaf spring, probably the beam axles, the old days. You know, beam axles and leaf springs are sort of your load sharing. And then, you know, these days we've got plenty which are independent. And how I describe it, and why the 120% rule, as we sort of bring them up here, why they're important, is, think about it this way, and particularly in our country, is we have a lot of steep driveways, and you know, you come out of petrol stations and the like, and or you use potholes as another one. What will happen is, if you've got a load sharing, it works together, but you know, you look at coming out of a strong incline, when you're coming out on an independent, one of those wheels will be off the ground, so that's where the other load needs to take that extra 20%. So.
And again, it's just more about protecting your caravan and the tow vehicle as well.
Yeah, correct. So that sort of, you know, there's some requirements around axles and how they set up, and we just sort of then talked about those. If I'll scroll up just to talk quickly about the mud guards and wheel guards, we sort of said touch on those, and there's requirements around those, and probably this measurement's probably the critical one, Linda, with the how high it has to be off the ground, as I probably zoom into that a little bit.
Yeah, again, the design behind that is purely because they want to make sure that when you are going along this terrain, that any debris that gets kicked out from the wheel rotating doesn't fling to your friends behind you if you're in a convoy of caravans. So the mud guards actually, they do have an important job, and most people just sort of overlook them and say, oh yeah, whatever. No, they do have a purpose, because that's the last thing you want to do is deal with a shattered windscreen because the guy in front didn't have his mud guards on.
Yeah, exactly.
A piece of gravel, crack it, and you're out in Cooper Pedy and you've got nowhere to get your...
Correct. And, you know, in cars these days, in particular, if we're related to cars, a lot of them are built into the body design.
Absolutely.
It's based around that sort of stuff. So you've got the articulation angles and the like there. There's some stuff here about wheels and tyres. We sort of, in a couple of other topics, talked about, you know, ratings and all that, which probably leads us into, as I'll just share the other screen, which we started to talk about, tyres and the like, and what the ratings actually mean. And once again, our friends at Caravan Industry Association Australia developed this diagram for industry businesses. But if you want to, you know, talk about these tyres and what you could find in your tyres, Linda.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so generally you want, obviously some people want to upgrade tyres and so on. I always get them to check their tyre placard and work within the bounds of that, because the tyres have particular dimensions and offsets. Just because it's a nice big tyre may not necessarily mean it belongs on your vehicle. Your vehicle may be designed in such a way that that won't fit. So you won't be able to steer without it contacting the body or so on. Very important to understand your load index. And a lot of people will see, if they take a look, they'll see where there's max load, there'll be a couple of numbers, like for example here, 106. That is the load index, that very first number.
We've got it down here.
Yeah, and so when the caravan manufacturer has selected the tyres, it's done so that you have enough capacity for your load for the ATM. Now, like I said, generally, I find that through my audits, a lot of the manufacturers are well above the load rating. So and for two reasons: A, to give you room to grow, like I said, if you are looking at upgrading. But secondly, if the tyre is slightly higher spec, typically you'll see on a lot of the caravans these days a light truck tyre, LT tyres, and the sidewall on the tyre is a lot more stiffer. So what that means is, as you're towing, you'll get less of this wallowing motion. The design and it means that you will track better, and it's a stiffer feeling, so you'll get a lot more of the feel of the road coming through. It won't be so wishy-washy. Right. So just in terms of the two numbers, people tend to make this mistake quite a lot. Where you've got T2, 106 is actually for a single tyre on an axle. Dual doesn't mean you've got two axles. It's the setup there where you'll see them obviously in a lot of trucks, you'll have dual tyres. That's what that number is for. And as Daniel showed you further down, that load rating, each of those tyres has a maximum capacity at a particular tyre pressure. So that's another really important thing that I think some people, maybe again through lack of awareness or education, they're not aware that they should regularly check their tyres, the tyre pressure on the caravan, and to do that when it's cold, before you've towed. Very important, because as you use your caravan, the temperature of the air within the tyre heats up and expands. So once the tyre's already warm, if you were to do a reading there, it's irrelevant, because you've already heated up, and air expands obviously in heat. So you have to do your tyre setting before you leave, before you tow.
Correct.
Check it, make sure it's correct.
Correct. And you know, I guess with all these ratings, and you know, what are we trying to say besides what's on the screen, is the fact that all these are being designed, engineered from a tyre industry particularly, and there's a standard around each of these, that this tyre, the walls, as Linda talked about, the thicknesses and the designs and the offsets and all that, have been tested and designed to certain areas, and this is how it's the table of how those designs fit. And I guess there's also speed ratings as you've got there as well, so they can go to a certain speed, and each product needs a certain minimum speed and all that as well. So there's a lot of technical data and testing and engineering that sits behind it. This is probably a very simple way to show it, but this is sort of showing you what the information on that tyre is saying. And then you go relate that back to your compliance plate. We sort of, in another session, we talked about it before. If I sort of scroll across, you get those tyre information on there, so that's what was on there originally. So if you upgrade it, it won't be the same, but you can sort of see then, as you sort of go along, and then you've got pressures that sit with those. So, that's sort of how it sits now. Probably something, I know it's been brought up to me in the past, and I've done some research on it, but the age of tyres is a critical aspect, Linda, and though there's no real set standard, however, there's an industry standard that sits within the tyre industry, and I know that 10 years max is pretty much the life cycle of a tyre, and they say that it should be replaced. So, our products, they last a long time, and you can have a 1980s, 1960s, 70s caravan. The tyres are too old; they need to be replaced, and you could have some issues around insurance and warranty, or not warranty, because it's 40 years. I don't be a good warranty, but I think
warranty.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think they recommend after 6 or 7. I think it's 6 years you should get them checked as well.
So what they do, they check the treads. They check essentially the structure of it. Rubber does decompose. It's not structurally sound. It's not an infinite life type of material. And even though they've progressed so far in rubber compounds, they're still finite. They have a certain life, and there's no point having a great trailer braking system if your tyres are, at best being held together, and all it will take is one large brake activity for them to blow. So, and you really, I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that the tyres are healthy, so to say, that they're correctly inflated, because that directly affects how your caravan will be towed. And the fact that it's coupled to the draw vehicle means that you and your occupant are at risk if you do not make sure that your tyre pressures are correct and that the tyres are in good condition.
Yeah, exactly right. Obviously it's the thing between the product and the ground that connects the two. So you got to make sure you got the right ones at all time. No different to our cars that we do all the time. And you just got to make sure you look after them. And I think the issue and how I describe this, and particularly now, and what we're facing is, people could have a caravan sit in the backyard and go, oh, I don't need it anymore, and I'll go sell it. But the tyres could be worn and old, and you might buy it not thinking about it, but you've got to be very wary of that, because it could cause you major grief by exploding and having issues because the tyres just disintegrate, or the rubber's disintegrated, as you explained before.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of before you drive a vehicle, I don't know if everyone remembers, the whole routine of doing the walk around your vehicle before you drive. It's the same with the caravan. You just give it a quick once over. You might catch something. You might be a cut, or something's dislodged, or it takes all of a minute. And
correct. And the cuts and all that is a very good one, because we're traveling with these products sort of anywhere and everywhere, and you could pick up a nick that you don't even realise, and that could be detrimental for future travel. So when you stop and get a coffee, or stop at the survey and just do a quick walk around and open your eyes, and particularly the tyres, which are a critical aspect, just double check them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So hopefully this will help people just to stress the importance of it. And it's not a matter of just kick the tyre, it'll be fine. There's a little bit more to it, unfortunately.
Yeah, correct. And I think, the pressures as well are probably, as you sort of touched on before, important, and sort of setting those to the conditions and setting those to the weight capacities, because there's a real science around those that people need to be wary of. So hopefully everyone got a bit out of that, particularly around the capacities of how it all works, and what are those markings on the tyres. And as you said, and I was going to say it too, but you sort of beat me to it, is single means one tyre on an axle, and dual is 2 tyres on an axle, not single and dual axles as we know it. And we sort of talked about axles before at the start of it, but industry terminology. So it's how many tyres. So.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, it's funny. People been in industry for 40, 50 years and they still don't know that bit. So hopefully we've educated some people today, Linda.
Oh, hopefully. We do our best, right? So
we try. As you always said, it's about education to help you guys have safe travels and understand the products a little bit further to have those good and memorable journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
All right. So that's probably it for tyres. We will talk about brakes in another topic as well. So obviously the axles and the brakes are all into one, but they form 2 different critical aspects as well. So we'll break those down as well as weights and a few other topics. So tune into those sessions as well. So thank everyone for their time.
Thank you.